Well, it's Friday again, and here we are.
Yes, we certainly are, Merv. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I was just thinking, it's been a while. It's probably been a year since we've done any kind of podcast on leadership, particularly with regard to leadership as project managers. So I was thinking that might be a good one to deal with today. I don't know, do you have any like vignettes or anything to start us off? Or
I have a bunch of stories.
yeah, I bet we
So,
both do.
so my favorite leadership story was my first supervisor when I was working, building or helping. At that time, I was helping build an IT help desk for a transportation corporation. This IT help desk was going to cover New Mexico and Texas and part of Oklahoma. And we had like 7 of us workers. We had 3 supervisors who were actually looking at groups of workers in other parts of the states. And my supervisor locally here was a kick in the pants. And he said, "Tim, I'm getting old and I'm lazy. And I'm going to take my management skills and I'm going to break them up into 5 pieces. And I'm going to give a piece of my management to each one of those of you. And it'll give me an opportunity to work with each one of you and also give me an opportunity to help you develop strong character and attitude, because working in the transportation company, you do have attitudes." And so he was actually my first example of a great leader, where he basically protected us and he also made sure that we had everything we had. But he actually didn't mind if we did things a little different from the way he did. In fact, he promoted it, and he liked it best when he created an environment where he had a bunch of guys who didn't agree with each other and bounced ideas off of each other. And it was chaotic and confusing at first, but as you get used to this and you get used to this style of leadership, it was like, how can people work any other way? And it was just lucky. And this man did not go to business school. Later, when I went to business school, I said, aha, this is how and why he does things. And it was just like talking to other people who learn as they go. This is something that is acquired. It's not something that you're born into.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is acquired. And I think also you can start acquiring that even as a young person. I know I had, for example, one of my coaches, my hockey coach, when I was growing up, he never went to any kind of college. He was a farmer, born and bred, and just loved being a farmer, but he loved being a hockey coach, and he had leadership beyond anything. I'm not sure where he got it, but he certainly gave it, or was able to bestow it onto the entire team for those of us who are willing to take it. So yeah, it is acquired, but it's something that that's desirable and something that you can see in people as they progress in their careers or just in life in general.
Exactly. So we have a lot to talk about.
We do.
We have to, first of all, before we get started, let's talk about, finding a really good definition of what we mean by leadership and what it is and how is it different from management. Because I know that the body of knowledge, the project management body of knowledge, spends a lot of time, or at least it used to spend a lot of time differentiating the two. And I think it will actually cause us value to do the same.
Yeah, I think so too. Actually, while you were telling your little story, I did a little Google search. So let me give you the researcher's definition of leadership. How about it's a set of behaviors that are used to help people align their collective direction.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Does that not sound like a dictionary or something? But
that's beautiful. Let me actually compare that. It used to be part of the 6th edition of the Project Management Body of Knowledge, but they've moved it into the Process Group Practice Guide. And let me see if I can find it. And we can actually compare, and we can bounce bounce this idea back and forward and see what we like about it. Okay.
So while you're looking that up, let me give you how I define it in 5 words, 5 descriptive words. I would say it's authoritativeness. And when I say authoritativeness, I mean the good kind of authority, not the hit you with a hammer kind of authority. It's also influence, and I think that's probably, maybe I should have listed that one first, because I think leaders are influential people. It's also command. You have to be in command of your surroundings, of your tasks, of your project, of your vision. You have to be effective. I think there's effectiveness involved in that. And by the way, we're going to talk about management here, I assume. I think effectiveness is also a management characteristic. Sway or clout as well. You have sway, you have clout. So those are nice. I think those are nice, descriptive, 5 single words that talk about leadership.
Yeah, let's actually take the academic definitions of some words and see if they compare to yours. We'll get to this management compared to leadership in a second, but rank. Rank is the job title and power assigned to you by a company or by an organization. Power is the ability to influence. It's the energy behind influence. And authority is the right to wield that power in order to influence. How does that sound for those 3?
Yeah, that's good. People can get sideways with the word power.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that the way you just defined it, power is definitely a positive term, not one that says, do what I say or else. That's not power. That's
I actually call power a hammer word. See, I look at hammers as neither good nor bad, right? They can push nails into wood, they can break windows. And basically power is a type of hammer. It's not the tool itself that's good or bad. It's the intention behind using it that's really good or bad. So when we look at power, it's just energy. It can shock people. You get to work, or it can be, the ability to move things out of the way so people can do their work easily.
But I noticed one thing we left out. We never said that leaders were necessarily good managers.
No. And that's where I wanted to go. Yeah. Exactly. So here is the difference between leading and managing. Let's carve out an image. Okay. You're in a server room or you're in a lab, and you as a project manager have to get boxes from the back of the lab to the door. Okay. If you manage this task, you say, okay, go over there, pick up that box, carry it over there and put it by the door. Okay, we say that directing another person to get from one point to another using a known set of expected behaviors. Okay, it's task oriented. It's very tactical.
Yeah.
A leader says, I'm working with others through discussion or debate in order to guide them. And maybe a leader gets everybody in the middle of the room and say, hey, our objective is to get these boxes by the door in order for the mailroom to pick them out in time for the last mail run. How are we going to do it? And that's what a leader does. It's strategic, it's collaborative, and innovative, because the people may decide there's enough of us to make a chain across the room, and we'll just hand the boxes from one to another and we'll get there quickly.
Sure. So from a management point of view, as you said, you directed someone. Management, I guess to me, in many ways, the old definitions that we had in the old process-oriented project management body of knowledge dealt with the processes of planning and organizing the resources and the activities and all that sort of thing that goes into a project. To me, that is management. Now,
go ahead.
From a leadership point of view, I may not be very good at some of those things, but I may be able to incentivize my staff such that they become very good. At the same time, as a manager who instructs people to do those things, I may not be good at influencing my staff or my team to be able to do that for us. So leadership and management have crossovers, but they're definitely not the same thing.
Yes, exactly. Where a manager has a checklist and says you did this, this in the right order. And by the way, you did it 17 seconds less. Great, right? Yeah. It gives you the data. It's your arts and charts. Yeah. Where leadership is your relationships and it's your understanding of human behavior.
And there's, by the way, we are not saying that leadership is a better role than management. We need good managers just like we need good leaders. And if you can have both characteristics in the same person, you're way ahead of the game.
Yes, yes, yes. And in fact, projects benefit from people who actually develop both management and leadership skills because of the unique nature, right? They're not operations that are ongoing and repetitive. It's basically, we only have a short amount of time. We only have so much money, and we have this amount of scope we have to complete. You know, it's a management problem plus a leadership problem. So you need to have both sets of skills.
Yeah. So that's kind of the broad brush. How about we narrow it down to project leadership? Is project leadership different than ordinary organizational or business leadership?
Ooh, this is where things get sticky. Okay, so think of it this way. In order for leadership to be different, leadership deals with the aspects of human behavior.
Right.
So if you think about it, it may be different only in the manner that human behavior be different between projects and operations. And the only thing I can think that's different is that unique start and end, you know, and that definition of that we have, you know, something unique that requires its own plan. So within those two components, leadership can be the same, different, but everything else, you know, human behavior is human behavior.
Yeah, I grew up actually in my career in IT in terms of the consulting side, where we went in and we developed systems based on projects for a company, and then we left. Sometimes we got maintenance contracts, maintenance and operations, but at some point we would deliver and we would leave. So in some ways, there is another uniqueness about projects from my experience, and that is that we dealt with not only a definitive start and end time, but a lot of times the people I dealt with project to project were different people. And so in some ways, it became more of a challenge than, say, leading an operations or business team, because I could every 6 months, every month, every year or every couple of years, I could end up with a whole new team that I had to get used to and try to understand what motivates them. So,
yeah, and think about the life cycle of the career of a project manager too. We focus primarily on our management skills because that's what we can show early success in. Do I hit my schedule? Do I hit my budget? Do I hit my scope? And those type of things. But as we go further, as we get bored with this in 3 to 5 years, you know, we start working on our leadership, which is, you know, what is the satisfaction? What am I really creating an engaging environment? Is there enough innovation and collaboration? So from a life cycle standpoint, I think it's easy to enter into project management as a management activity, but it really benefits. And we find it almost a necessity in large complex projects that we apply also leadership.
well, in fact, you've just summed up part of my career, and that is exactly, I entered project management as in my own mind, in my own thought process, in my own watching how other managers did it from a management perspective. And as you said, schedule, budget, resources, all of the kinds of things that went into managing a project. And it wasn't until I had done this for a while that I realized that I could also influence staff And the part that you said, when we get bored with it, part of my leadership activity and learning was to take those activities that I became very good at, the management aspects, and began to give them to my co-leads or my subordinates, and have them learn those very critical skills of managing a project. And then I could not sit back. You could never sit back on a project, but I could literally then spend some time overseeing and leading the entire team.
Yes, yes, yes. And that's the way it should be. If you look at corporations and the life of a career within a corporation, you see the same type of life cycle. There's basically, there's basically continuity as you grow in your experience and your influence, as you go, from a team member to a team lead, to a project lead, to a business lead, to an organizational lead, to a director, to a vice president, finally the CEO. You're moving from management work to strategic and leadership work as well. So we see this not just in our personal careers, but just in the natural way that people within a group progress based on their confidence and experience.
Yeah. And I can honestly say that if you were to ask me to be a project scheduler today, like in my younger days as a project manager, I would not nearly be as good at it as I used to be.
Yeah.
And that even goes with the fact that the tools have improved since I did it.
Oh boy. I agree with you. It's a really different approach, and I really can't wait to see how the changes in all technology are going to influence the tools we as project managers have in the next few years.
So yeah, especially with artificial intelligence, maybe I can just speak into my computer and it will give me a Gantt chart that's perfect.
Or you have a computer that you say, okay, let's add a probabilistic layer to this project, and let's put inferences of confidence on these different paths, and we can start talking about alternatives like they wanted to back in the 1960s. This is where things get really interesting.
Yeah. And maybe I'll be retired before I have to get that interested.
I think you and I both. This is work worthy of the generation that we're supporting as we
exactly. Yes.
So go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you'd mentioned the power word before. And one of the power words that jumped out at me in my thinking through this leadership thing is the word authority. Is leadership different than authority? Do leaders have authority, or can anyone on the project be a leader? What's your mind? How does your mind work around this whole idea of leadership and authority?
Okay, so we have a general and a pretty specific definition of leadership, right? Let me give you an image of what I think was an incredible leader. Okay. So here I was flying to corporate headquarters down in Cupertino. Let's say every 6 weeks, I had to meet with my boss in the organization, right? And I'd fly in Monday evenings, and then on a Tuesday morning, I'd go in early to the cafeteria to grab a bite to eat before I went into the meetings. Well, I'd catch the CEO on a Tuesday morning before he went into work too. And over the time I was there, over a year and a half, he actually was sitting down and talking to a certain janitor. Every Tuesday I flew in there, he was talking there, and he wasn't just directing or listening or talking to him. He was actually listening. And I always wondered what that janitor said that was so important to that CEO. Now, I would actually propose to you that that janitor was a leader too. They may not have a lot of authority, but they do have the qualities of leadership.
Oh, that's good. So in terms of how would you define authority then? And let's say in general, well, actually, let's be a little more specific if we want to, and that's to project management. What's the authority definition that you can think of?
Okay, when I say authority, it's the permission or the approval to use power.
Hmm.
A janitor does not usually have the permission to apply their power. But you know what? You can get authority and power from any other area, not just rank, not just by your job title. And that's what rank is. Like if I'm an expert, I
Yeah.
have expert authority, right?
Yeah.
Or if I have charisma and charm, right? People are drawn to me by my character. These things actually grant you authority too. And they're not quite leadership, but they allow you to perform and apply your leadership in pretty effective ways.
So the way I'm reading that is that authority gives you the right to control or command or to determine what's going on, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the person with authority also is a good leader. But I remember early on in my career, this goes back years, and I actually started off, you'd mentioned data center work. I'd actually started off working in a data center for the first 3 years of my career. I was on the system engineering side, but nonetheless, the data center was central to what it was that we did. And I remember the head technician, the person with the authority, the manager, the supervisor, whatever you want to call them, of the technical team. That is the database team, those folks. He hired someone in at a salary that was 50% greater than his own. And I was young, fresh out of school. I'm going, what? I don't understand it. How can you, manager, hire an underling at 50% higher than you? And his answer was, because he is that good. In this case, it was a him. He is that good. I can't do what he can do. And I need a person like that to be able to run this entire database structure. And so I thought, after I sat back and thought about it for a while, he had the authority to do whatever he needed to do to make that technical team run. But he also had the leadership humility to not worry about whose salary was greater, because he wanted the entire organization to be more productive.
That is very astute.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. I hear these stories every once in a while from people, and I realize that, yeah, they may not be managers in the way others manage, but they're incredible leaders. Now, I'm going to propose to you, and this is something that we may need to have a conversation in future calls. But in the future, I think that of necessity, as project managers, we're going to have to rely more on leadership than management because of the nature of the changing of work. I'm just going to leave this out there, but I want you to think about this, and how could that be true?
Well, I was thinking about that myself, but in a different way, Tim. And that was, I'm wondering if the entire agile process came out of that exact thinking. Because, in agile, yes, you have project managers, you have team leads, but they're not part of the scrum there to put their weight against the group of people who are in the particular situation in the agile process. They're there to manage the vision and that sort of thing, but they're not there commanding. Typically, it's the scrum master or the product owner who is making the rules or incenting the entire team to work properly. So I'm wondering if the leadership aspect contributed to the agile process coming into vogue.
Boy, you hit it on the head. Okay, if you look in the Agile Practice Guide and also the Body of Knowledge and the Process Group Practice Guide, they all come to some agreement where traditional work allows you to build a solid plan, and the success of a traditional project is how robust that plan will be. Where Agile, you don't have the ability for a robust plan. So what do you focus on? You focus on the relationships. You focus on the ceremonies and the structures of how we're going to work together and negotiate. And that's where a leadership comes in. You're exactly right. And so we can take a corollary from what we've just talked about, and we can assume that as our work progresses inside companies, our work is going to have to embrace some type of agile behavior more and more and more.
Oh, I totally agree with that. The question I first asked when we started this part of the discussion was authority and leadership. And the other thought I had was that leadership encompasses authority much of the time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that leadership is completely just authoritative. I think leadership involves much more. I think I gave you 5 words before, dealt with things like influence and having command of the vision or the project, and have, the effectiveness of your team. So leadership, I think, is more than just the authority. It's a lot more. It's all of these other things that bring the holistic approach to motivating your team.
And let's call it what it is. Okay. When we talk about demonstrating leadership behaviors, we're not just talking about project managers demonstrating this. This leadership is not relegated just to the person on top. And the PMBOK is very, very, very adamant about making that statement. Okay.
Well, I will totally accept that. I have had teams where people have come front and center in terms of their leadership style without even knowing they were leaders. I've had situations where we were driving towards a deadline, and I had 1 or 2 people who completed their tasks early. They went to people who were struggling and said, "Can I help you?" Now that's leadership. I think we've discussed this in the past. That's almost a servant leadership approach. But rather than pick up their backpacks and leave for the day and go have a couple beers together, they hung around and made sure the entire team succeeded. To me, that's leadership. No one even asked them to do that. They just did it of their own accord.
Yeah. This is the words that the body of knowledge is looking for. I've been looking for this for 4 weeks. Leadership is not exclusive to any specific role. High-performing projects may feature multiple people exhibiting effective leadership skills. That's the key. Anyone on a project can have these and help the project team perform and deliver.
And it's the leader with the authority who shows his leadership or her leadership by looking around to see who on the team is exhibiting those skills so that they can help promote them into their own leadership.
Yeah, at the very least, This is the beauty of delegation, because as I delegate, I can actually give people opportunities to step up, which allows me an opportunity to step up myself.
Yeah. So in all this great benevolence of a leader who also has authority, what good is authority? Well, who cares about authority? If you're a good leader, why do you need authority?
You need recognition. There's 2 reasons. We can break it down. If you want to look in the social sciences and human behavior, you can look at it from a culture and a politics standpoint. Number 1, we need some recognition that there are some group norms and behaviors that we need to all ascribe to, right? There's some things we need to do as a group to define the group. That's culture. And then we have to have politics. And politics is the rank and authority that's there. It's the written rules and laws that create the discipline and structure that allow us to function well as a group. And those 2 things together, the politics plus the culture, are necessary. And because of that, authority plays a primary role in both culture and politics. And so I see it as a primary contributor. It's not like what defines leadership, and leadership does not define authority, but leadership is critical, and well-defined leadership is critical, but authority as well is necessary for a fully functioning group.
Yeah, and typically, well, certainly in the Western cultures, I suspect this is true anywhere. is that authority tends to be tied to a position of the person. And as the person moves up in rank, the authority gets larger, gets more impressive, shall we say, or gets more and more. That person gets more and more authority. And so from that perspective, you still need, in my way of thinking, you still need a person where the buck stops here.
Well, and it's built into our human nature. It's a physical piece of our structure.
Yeah.
If you look at the neuroscience of it, number one, when you're part of a group and you recognize you're part of a group, you get this rush of serotonin. That is a reward function. So there has to be some type of reason. This is important to the human. Second of all, when I bond with social groups in this authority model, I'm acting as a parental figure. And whenever I do that, it's just like picking up your baby and holding it first time. And all of a sudden, oxytocin is released. So we get a double whammy of happy juice by having authority and also being part of the group.
No, I'm sure. I've never quite thought of it that way. I guess what I thought of was in terms of you and I are peers on a project, and we're having an incredible difference of opinion as to what our next step is. Who's going to break the stalemate? Is our boss, who has the authority to do so. Without that authority, how do we ever break that stalemate and move forward?
Right. You're exactly right. And from a pragmatic functional standpoint, it's as easy as that.
Yeah.
Now, we can actually look at different sources of authority and power if we don't have that rank from the organization, like you and me. We're more peers when we're talking and we're working on our projects together. So we have to rely on other things. And this is where we get to our different forms of leadership and leadership styles, which more or less talk to us about, where do we get our different powers and authority from?
I guess we can look at some leadership styles and see if that makes sense to us.
Yeah, let's do. So first of all, what do you call a leadership style, and why do we have different styles?
Well, I think you mentioned the term earlier, human behavior. I think a lot of style comes from the way we were perhaps reared, the way we have interacted with people, the way people have interacted with us. So, for example, I think depending on even the influence someone gets as they're growing up, they can be raised in being a very servant-oriented leader, or they can be raised in terms of becoming a very autocratic leader. And some of that is perhaps brought forward from their nature, but a lot of it could be brought forward from their nurture. So there's many, many styles, but I think it comes down to human behavior. I'm not a person who studies the human behavior aspects that much, but it just seems to me that it comes from how we're reared and how we're made up.
Oh, yeah. Well, think about traditional ones like transactional. You mentioned servant leader, and transformational and charismatic in interaction, right? Yeah. Let's talk about transactional. My mom's style was transactional, right? If you get everything done with the chores, we can eat dinner earlier, right? There's an effort, and because of that effort, there's a reward, right? And that's what a transaction is, and that's how leaders can lead.
Carrot and stick.
That's right, carrot and stick. Now, my dad was different. My dad painted a picture of the perfect gentleman, full of integrity and full of character and full of what did he call it? Civility. That's he got that from George Washington. And my dad would say it's important for a leader to be civil, to have good habits and very good and proper manners, right? And he was more transformational, where he created this idealized image, like visionary, right? And so I got a dose of transformational and transactional, but then I went through music between the age of 9 and 25, where I learned how to move people in music and art, and I became very influential, and that impacted my style, and that's where I picked up the ability to apply charismatic leadership style as well.
So in your situation, much like I was stuttering, yours is very much a nurture sort of thing. And there are certain innate qualities, I believe, in the way you were, basically the way you were born. There's certain innate style. Now, I can tell you that my father, he was a strong leader. He was a school principal as well as on the farm, but he was what I would call autocratic.
Mm-hmm.
And he learned that because his parents came from Eastern Europe. In Eastern Europe, there was the whole war thing, there was poverty, there was a culture where they were farming, and so they had to get the crops in, get the crops off, there was no time to waste. It was very cut and dry. And so that was passed on to my father, and that's how he dealt with us in terms of his autocratic style. And when I first started being a project manager, I thought that's how you led people, was you told them what to do. Basically, you controlled their decision making. It was unilateral. Sometimes it was coercive, but it was not from a perspective of what's my favorite or least favorite leadership style. I've since learned that is my least favorite leadership style.
Right. I agree. There is one leadership style that I've found for myself personally to be ineffective, and that's laissez-faire.
Yeah, I agree.
Again, leadership exists to create some sense of discipline, not to constrain people, but to create an environment where they feel safe. And go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and I might even say that perhaps my least favorite leadership style is laissez-faire, because even in an autocratic style, at least you get a decision.
Yes. And I have always equated laissez-faire to complacency. Hands off to me has always carried a sense of non-action. So just because I have that image in my head means I'm not going to be effective as a laissez-faire leader. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody else won't be effective. Yeah. It just means that for a style, for me personally, it's not my chosen one.
The one that always surprised me from a leadership style perspective was the bureaucratic. I am not in favor of the bureaucratic leadership style, and yet I have spent 40 years largely in government projects. And what's interesting to me is, I still don't favor that style, but understanding the style, I got good at working underneath that style from my client's perspective.
Right.
It's not a favorite, but it works for me because I learned how to work within it.
See, and that's what we have to realize. We have our preferences, and they all have their functions. My grandfather, who was a federal lobbyist for the farm community in the farm industry through the 50s and 60s, and he said, Tim, government is not nice. It's not there to be nice. Right. And government works really slow. But just like a flour mill, when it works slow, it grinds things really, really fine. And so although I didn't enjoy it, like you, I learned to respect it and respect bureaucracy for the benefits it alone can provide.
Yeah, I liked it for the expectation, to expect. What I didn't like it for was that there was less creativity, because people who use the bureaucratic team style often wanted to work within the fence. They didn't want to ever look over the fence and look at something more creative or visionary. So
yeah, so there's that, and there's also the lack of sense of urgency. There's quite a few things that bureaucracy has to eliminate in order it to function the way it does.
Right. Okay, so we talked about bureaucratic, transactional, transformational, laissez-faire, autocratic. I mentioned sort of at a glance, servant leadership, which we've talked about in the past as well. Maybe that's a good one also to spend a couple minutes on servant
Yeah,
leadership.
why don't you give me a good definition of
Well,
servant leadership?
I like that because you come alongside your team not as their buddy, much like a parent shouldn't come alongside their child as a buddy. You still have sort of authority over what it is that they do on a day-to-day basis. But you do come alongside them in terms of understanding their needs and prioritizing their needs and well-being so that you prepare them, or you prepare an environment for them to work within that is motivational, that is influential, that allows them to creatively show their own skills and progress.
That's good. That's good. Let me give you two definitions, and they're really different. But they actually are like looking at a house from different perspectives and seeing a totally different house. Okay. This is the first definition. Understanding and addressing the needs and development of project team members in order to enable the highest possible project team performance. That's exactly what you were saying.
Right.
Now, let's compare this. An understanding and practice of leadership that places the good of those led over the self-interest of the leader, emphasizing leader behaviors that focus on follower development and de-emphasizing glorification of the leader. See, that second definition talks about what I believe is a requirement for leadership, which is sacrifice.
Yeah. It's sort of an extension of the first, but it really talks about putting my needs second to my team's needs.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So I like to actually compare those two. And that gives us a better perspective of being of service.
Yeah. I think there's also a couple others. I think there's a coaching leadership style.
Oh, yeah.
One that provides mentorship and guidance. I think there's also, well, to me, visionary is probably, when people think of leadership, I think they think in terms of a visionary person. And I think a visionary leader is also one who you can sort of see the future very clearly. I mean, it's there, but also to be able to take that and work with your team so that they can also see that vision clearly.
Yeah, my favorite business director was the director that hired me into consulting, okay? And he actually said that you have to be a bit of both too, but he was talking about business management. He said, think about this. A manager is building a road in a jungle and is saying, okay, go 2 degrees here, go 2 degrees there. Let's get 2 feet more than we went yesterday, and making sure all the processes are there so you get the appropriate progress. Where a leader is up at the top of the tallest tree and talking to the manager and say, see that mountain in the distance? We need to just go right over the top of that mountain and then we'll be there. And so we need that leadership and management together. Like you said, we need that actions and actual steps and activities to move forward, but we need that vision to propel us and motivate us.
Oh, exactly. And I think you had mentioned the word charismatic before. I think this person is also charismatic. And by the way, for those listening to us, I don't think Tim or I are meaning to say that once you are pigeonholed into one of these areas, that's the kind of leader you are. I think a leader may have 2 or 3 of these. You can be a visionary leader and a coach and a servant leader at the same time, all wrapped up in the same person, I think. I believe.
Yeah, and think about this. If you have occupational safety health coming next week to your construction site, you're not going to be collaborative. You're not going to be charismatic. You're going to be authoritative. Look, right, guys, if we don't pass this, we're kicked off the work site. Maybe we have to do it this way.
Maybe even autocratic.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So, we start off with our preferred skills, but we have to be, ready to have basically a quiver of different arrows that we have when we're going out into our management life.
So I think there's probably some more leadership styles, but I think the ones we've spoken about and kind of described, I think my favorite is probably the visionary leader who can help me see what they see. And maybe a close second would be that servant leader who puts my needs at the forefront so that I can be given sort of the full ability to show my skills and to be able to produce what it is that person needs from me. My least favorite, I think I've mentioned already, probably the laissez-faire, because even a laissez-faire leader without being able to make a decision is probably worse than the autocratic leader who I really do not like.
Yeah, at least they're sending the project in a duration.
Yeah.
So here's a good question. We talked about power, authority, and influence. What about motivation? What is motivation, and how do we use it? What is in motivation that we don't have in influence and authority?
Well, for me, motivation is just be able to, it's the reason a person does something. To me, that's in terms of how they're motivated. But you and I have had this conversation in past podcasts, and that is that we as managers can't motivate someone to do something. We can only create the conditions for the person to motivate themselves.
Right. So what we do is we find something that gives them a reason to do the job that's very personal. That's why we talk about Maslow and Maslow's hierarchy, the fulfillment of personal needs, whether it's safety or physiological or social or, respect. All of these things are needs. And if I can connect fulfillment of a person's individual needs to the work they're getting done, I'm actually, what I'm doing? I'm playing with their survival mechanism. Mm-hmm. Again, this is a powerful tool, which can be used for motivation. It can also be used for manipulation. If I'm connecting their behavior and their actions with fulfillment of the personal needs, they'll do something better and more than as if I would have required them to do it by just giving them direction.
Right. Yeah, because I'm a firm believer. I didn't think that was true before, but I'm a firm believer in the fact that I don't believe that we can motivate a single person to do a single thing that they don't want to do. And the way I can prove that is I've had children.
Well, it's not only that, but it's their values, it's their principles, it's their habits. I cannot go into a person's head and change their habits. So I can't change their behavior. I can't change their perceptions or opinions. This is something we all need to take ownership for. And I only replace a person on a team if they can demonstrate they cannot change their habits or perceptions. Again, this is something that I can't fault people for, because this is difficult work to go inside yourself and make these changes.
I was smiling while you were saying that, because I just thought back to when I was in high school. Back when I was in high school, this was before we had to do our own keyboarding and stuff, in terms of programming or anything else. It was anathema for a male to take typing.
Oh, yes.
But here's what's interesting, talking about motivating. Nothing could motivate most of the guys who are on my basketball or hockey team to take typing. But our goaltender on our hockey team took typing. And so we razzed him mercilessly until he said, "Do you understand that I am the only male in a class of 30 females?" That was our goaltender's motivation for taking typing.
My dad was a major motivator. And my dad said, "Tim, computers are the direction of our future. So I would consider you take anything right now that you can make you better at computers." And so I made that selection for the very same reasons. Number one, as jobs changed, I would still have the skills needed. But second of all, yeah, I was in with a bunch of girls, and that was fun.
So you were self-motivated.
Exactly. And see, this is the key. I wouldn't do this on my projects, right? That's unethical.
Yeah.
But this is the same behavior we go through. And again, you can use logic, you can use ethics, but oftentimes emotion itself, I want that, I desire that, and value is founded deep, deep, deep within emotions. And so we have to realize that this is one of the greatest motivators.
So as leaders, how do we use our leadership skills then to motivate others? Have we answered that?
Oof. How about conviction?
Who's, ours or the person we're trying to motivate? The person.
Ours.
Oh yeah.
Think about that. A leadership needs to be convinced. They need to convince themselves before they convince other people. People can naturally sense when you're not behind an idea. You need that conviction.
That's a great point. People do sense. I think another word is sort of that whole area of showing you're authentic. If you're doing it just because you read it in a book, it's not going to work. But yeah, we have to create that environment and it's not just carrot and stick, but there's an environment for the person to say, I'm going to go for that. I'm going to show my entire team that we can beat that goal because I'm motivated. I'm going to work till 9 o'clock, whatever it takes.
And you brought up authenticity, right? Being authentic. There's another word for this that's sort of similar to authenticity, but it's a little different. It's called integrity.
Yeah.
Being of one mind. This is where your actions and your words say the same. Right. Now, here's the thing. We don't realize this when we first start off in management, but we're basically in a spotlight. And if I'm saying one thing and I'm doing another, I'm not just lacking integrity and people say they're not a great leader. No, I'm confusing these people. They don't know what to do. And if at the very best, they're not going to do anything, and I've caused that because of my lack of integrity.
Well, and I've seen that actually in so-called leaders or managers where they can reverse themselves within a week. And suddenly you're sitting there going, well, which way do you want me to go? The way you talked to me on Monday or the way you talked to me today? So we have to have that authenticity, that integrity. What is it? The congruity, I think it is.
Yeah, we call it a compass.
Yeah.
Right. We have moral compasses, we have functional compasses, we have social compasses, and we have that thing that's actually giving us personal direction. Right. And also we have what's called a North Star. Now, a North Star is not a destination. A North Star is a reference point that we can use to constantly course correct. And this is what's weird about people. People really recognize this without us telling them, I have a North Star or I have a compass.
Yeah. I heard one very influential, I think it was a pastor who talked about this. He called it peak to peak, where if you're looking, you're going to take that hill and you take the hill that you've just met your goal. You've motivated yourself, you've met that goal, and you look ahead, you see a valley and there's another higher peak that you didn't see from back there, but now you see it clearly. So that's your next goal. And so each peak is a little taller, a little more. So you're going peak to peak. And in that way, you're not only motivating yourself, but you're influencing those around you as you seek that next step in your career and their careers.
Boy, indeed. It sounds like as we go through, we're unearthing more and more about this leadership that we haven't talked about.
Yeah, we haven't.
I think that we need more exploration here. There's some other things we need to talk about first, but I would enjoy going forward and talking more and more about these other topics that we're bringing up, because I think as we progress and as the project managers mature under us and start to replace us, they're going to have to understand this even more than us.
Well, and that's the whole point of what it is that we're doing. We're on the tail end of our careers. But at the same time, you and I are both motivated, self-motivated, by the way. No one's telling us to do this, to give back to an industry that has supported us so well financially and cerebrally and, meeting our goals. But I'm thinking that for those who are listening right now, do we have any recommendations for people who want to practice their leadership as opposed to just being, well, I shouldn't say just being managers, but enhancing their management skills to also produce leadership skills within themselves?
Yes, I have one bit of advice I give all my students. If you think that you're lacking leadership, study it. Okay, I have lots of recommendations for biographies, for great speakers, motivational speakers, and also orators, right? 5,000 years we have been studying leadership. It's fascinating that, we have people that talk about it even today, just as fresh as it was back in Greece. Okay. Second of all, I think that what we learn, if it's interesting, if we're curious about it, we should take that aspect of leadership and play with it, not on other people, but ourselves. Because number one, we learn how it works. Number two, if it works on us, it's going to work on others. And number three, if we can lead ourselves, it gives greater potential for other people to follow us as well.
Well, and I'm also reminding myself of the good discussion we had a few minutes ago about leadership styles. And we talked about the styles that we liked and the styles that we disliked. I think even from a mentorship point of view, we should surround ourselves with good mentors, but also be very watchful of those leaders that are around us so that we can learn from both the good and the ones who are, and I don't want to say not good, because leaders are intrinsically, I think, pretty good, but also watch the mistakes that other leaders make and say, I'm not going to do that. So when I become a leader, that's not going to work for the people that I'm leading. So I'm not going to do that. So again, we can learn from a mentorship, both good and negative in our experience.
Very good. Very good. Okay. I think we're out of time today. This has been a wonderful discussion.
It has. It taught me a few things. I might even want to go back on projects.
At the same time, I do think that we've unearthed some topics and concepts that would really benefit from you and me together exploring some of these things. So I'm looking forward to that discussion as well.
Absolutely. All right.
And in the meantime, where can we find you?
As always, just look me up on LinkedIn and start that discussion going, especially if anything that we talked about today you agree with vehemently or you disagree with, sort of a little bit.
Yes, and me as well. LinkedIn and even possibly YouTube and other places that promote articles, research, and study in things like project management and leadership.
Perfect. All right.
Thanks again.
Until next week.